let's face it, we're not going to have a big clarifying election because nobody's really going to put the fundamental issues on the table. Probably what we'll get is some version of divided government. And under this scenario of divided government, it's Republicans in the Senate who come 2013 say, like, look, this issue's got to get resolved. It won't be, the House Republicans are too radicalized, but the Senate Republicans are going to say, look, time to solve this issue somehow and create the sort of political atmosphere where that could happen. Do you buy that, or can you envision other scenarios where come 2013 there's a convergence of incentives that force the political system to act in ways that it hasn't to date acted?
All right, so on these various political issues, first of all, is it a cynical disagreement or a principled disagreement? I think, like Ron said, it's both. There's elements of both. One way that I like to think about that question is, suppose we had a parliamentary democracy instead of this two houses and White House and stuff. I mean, the Founding Fathers designed the system so that it would be hard to do big things fast, right? And they were extremely successful, especially in this regard, all right? In a parliamentary democracy, one party would be in charge. If there was an issue, they would have to offer a solution to it, and it would get implemented, and public might not like it. They might vote that party out. The other party comes in and changes it. Fine, but somebody is actually responsible in a parliamentary democracy. In our system, everybody can pass the buck, and so you get these. I think it encourages some proposals that can only be described as mind-boggling. Gingrich's tax plan, for example, would extend the Bush tax cuts and cut taxes by $900 billion a year as of 2015. I mean, that's, $10 trillion over the decade. That's not a tax increase, obviously, that's a tax cut. And so that would just dig the hole even deeper. But he can go out and say that, knowing that that's never going to happen. But if he were elected, he would have to compromise. So if you look around the world, parliamentary democracies tend to be in better shape on these long-term fiscal issues than we are. It used to be the case that the only countries rated AAA were parliamentary democracies. I'm not sure how that. I know S&P downgraded people last week. I'm not sure how that stat holds, but generally, I think that that's an issue. The fact that nobody is actually responsible, and therefore, like Bell said, we have to ask somebody to take leadership. In a parliamentary democracy, again, there is someone who is de facto the leader, and so I think that's an issue. The Senate Republicans in 2013, I don't know. This is one of those things where you can go back in time and say, well, you did this, yeah, but you did this before me, yeah, but you did this before me, so on. Where I draw that line is the No New Taxes pledge. And as that Ron mentioned, something like 80–90% of the Republicans in Congress have signed it, right? And this isn't a statement that they hope there are no new taxes. This is a signed, written pledge that they won't raise tax rates, they won't remove deductions unless the money goes toward cutting tax rates. I don't see how you get around that politically. Either they have to en masse violate it, or we're stuck in a political stalemate where the Republicans say we won't raise taxes, and
Democrats
why not
say, tax reform,
why
which
should
most
we
people
cut?
think is a good idea anyway.
The pledge does not allow tax reform unless, as Bill said, any revenues that come from it are used to reduce tax rates. None of the new revenue can go to reduce the deficit. Right.
So our tax reform is basically a bait and switch strategy. The Republicans have to say something about taxes. They don't want to say, well, many of them do, but when many of them are willing to say it's all a spending issue, all we need to do is cut spending. But then if they say, well, what about taxes? Well, we'd like to reform the tax system, but they don't want to raise revenues. And the No New Taxes pledge prohibits them from doing that.
It's not like we're talking about inventing cold fusion or an anti-gravity machine or something like that. In 1997, Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton cut a deal. When Bill Clinton left office, we were running surpluses. Like, this should be doable, right?
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
should be
yeah.
doable, but it's not as long as the Republican Party is controlled by a group of people for whom the principle of no new revenues is the overriding objective and priority.
So the key
Well,
is
you're
that we
gonna
get
see in this-
enlightened, reasonable, calm Republicans to take control as like Newt Gingrich, right?
Yeah, but Newt is not where he was in the 1990s. The point is, I think, that the Republican Party has moved pretty far to the right.
But again, I would assert the point about leadership. I can recall very distinctly after Republicans closed the government twice in 96 and 97, and Clinton was completely whomping Republicans something fierce, and all of these very brave freshmen, another parallel with our current situation, started scratching their heads a little bit and saying, geez, Washington might not be like we thought. So Newt waddles on down to the White House and cuts a deal with the president, brings it back to the Republican caucus in the House and says, this is it. This is not the best deal, but it's the best deal we can get. And if you don't take it, get yourself another speaker. Right. And they took it. And we opened the government, and everybody lived happily ever after, and we balanced the budget. That's leadership. That's the kind of thing that we have to have. I think Bell's statement to put this on the door of the Republican Party is just grossly unfair. Democrats are equally intransigent about Social Security and Medicare, especially Medicare. So I just, both parties, a pox on both of them. They're both making mistakes, and the public needs to hold both parties accountable. But let me answer your question about, this will take 1 minute. There is some room for optimism here. I could imagine a situation that will occur after the election where the Bush tax cuts come up, and the Democrats say to the Republicans, and the president is with them, and they sit down, and they look across the table at them, and they smile at them nicely and tell them how sweet they are. And then they say, okay, guess what? If you don't pass something that includes new taxes, we're going to make sure it doesn't pass. I'll veto it, and the House, the Senate won't pass it. And then they need to sit there for an hour or a day or a month or whatever it takes, including closing the government, and explain to the public, we got to do this, we got to solve this problem, we're willing to give on our side. So, I mean, something like that could happen, it's imaginable.